related to either the income eligible or priority populations RFR. The slide deck for each RFR is also separate from these 4 folders. So these 4 folders contain all documentation. The RFR has been pulled out for visibility purposes, and the slide deck is also outside of these folders just for ease of access. So bidders can easily navigate to the RFR, pull down those documents, and just move forward throughout the response process. So the 4 folders in the required folder, exactly how it sounds. All documentation that's included in the required folder must be included as part of your response. In the read-only folder, same as it sounds. Read-only documentation does not need to be included as part of your response. It is strictly for instructional, informational purposes. Documentation contained in the informational folder is contractual documentation. So, upon awarding of a contract, EEC will reach out to the provider and request the documentation that is contained within the informational folder. And then the final provider qualification folder contains forms that are to be completed and uploaded by potential bidders that are brand new to the purchase of service contracting world in Massachusetts. So if you've never held a purchase of service contract in Massachusetts, please complete the provider qualification documentation located in that folder. Next slide, please. So this is a breakdown of the documentation that is included in the required forms folder. So the bidder checklist, I mentioned it in the previous bidders conferences. Please have this document open as you're navigating the remaining, navigating and completing the remaining required documents that are to be uploaded as part of your response. The bidder's checklist is really there to help the bidder keep track of the required forms that they are completing, saving, and getting ready to upload as part of the bidder response. That form is in a fillable PDF. The next form, bidder submission form, also in a fillable PDF. Fantastic for ease of access. If you click in the first cell of the PDF, you can enter your information, click tab, it'll move to the next cell, enter the next requested field, information that's requested in the next field, click tab. Just please remember to save your work as you move along, especially in the narrative sections. Save your work, save those files locally, keep them in. I would suggest creating a folder on your laptop or your desktop, and just as you're pulling down documentation, entering information, save it in that folder, keep everything organized in the same place. So when you're uploading that information onto your response, you can ensure you have a checklist there, you're checking off the documentation that you're uploading as part of your response, and you can ensure that you're uploading a complete response. The next form is the bidder submission spreadsheet. That is an Excel format. The tables in that spreadsheet correspond to the bidder submission form. Next, we have the budget form, purchase of service 3. That's in Word format. That's an OSD supplied budget form. The budget narrative is also in Word, and the budget narrative corresponds to the budget form. So the totals that are listed in your budget narrative should correspond to the totals that are listed in your budget form. The bidder submission spreadsheet also corresponds to the bidder submission form. So those 2 forms, actually 4 forms, submission form and spreadsheet will essentially toggle back and forth. You'll be entering information in one and toggling to the other, and the same goes for the budget form and the budget narrative. And finally, the supplier program diversity form is an Excel format that is in OSD, also an OSD supplied form. On that form, you'll be listing your SDP partners, and that is also that is a UFR filing form. for purchase of service contracts specifically. So please reference, it's located in the read folder. There's an instruction 7 supplier diversity program background form that contains numerous helpful links and background information on SDP specific to purchase of service contracts that is incredibly useful and can answer a lot of the questions. We've had a lot of questions come in the Q&A, and many of the answers to those questions are located in that instruction 7 supplier diversity program background document. Next slide, please. I just mentioned any new providers to purchase of service specific contracts in Massachusetts would be required to complete the contracting qualification form. That again is a fillable PDF. It's in the qualification folder. It's required for all new providers. There's an instructions form to go along with that contracting form. That is in the read folder. It's titled Instructions 8, Contracting Qualification Form. So in that form, you'll have, that form contains definitions to some of the language that's contained in the contracting qualification form. So if you have questions or you need assistance, please reference that form. The contracting qualification supplement form, also in a fillable PDF. Please complete that form if you're brand new to purchase of service contracting in Massachusetts, but you're somehow affiliated with an organization that holds a POS contract with a state agency. So we would just ask you to please list the agency in which you have this relationship, and there's other information that we're requesting in that contracting qualification supplement form. So please include both of those if required. Next slide, please. How to upload a quote. So please register in Combis if you have not done so as of yet. Register in Combis will give the bidder full functionality as far as being able to view all activity that is taking place under both RFRs. So you'll be able to see, view all documentation. You can do that as an unregistered vendor, but as a registered vendor, you'll be able to view all documentation, view all Q&A. You will not have to wait for a formal Q&A, or at least a formal Q&A document to be uploaded onto the bid solicitation itself to be able to at least view the questions that are coming in on the bid. So there's a huge advantage to being a registered vendor in Combis as soon as possible. It will give bidders the highest functionality possible. So on the slide, we've listed job aids for vendors using Combis. The links below are all contained within mass.gov. Mass.gov is a fantastic resource for OSD job aid documentation surrounding uploading a quote, registering in Combis, how to respond to bid solicitations, how to withdraw your quote, reopen your quote, or resubmit the quote. All of those activities, there are tutorials on mass.gov, OSD supplied provided tutorials that provide step-by-step instructions to go through all of those job aids. So they're very useful. Please utilize those resources. We've also included an instructions form in the read folder of both solicitations. It's titled Instructions 1, Vendors Responding Electronically Through Combis_read. Please have that document open as you would want to have that document open when your required forms are essentially complete and you're ready to go ahead and move forward and upload your quote. So that document will take you step by step through takes you through each step of the process, right through to bid submission. or response submission, excuse me, please utilize that resource. And if you have questions or you need technical assistance with uploading a quote, please contact the OSD Help Desk at the number. There's a phone number that we'll provide in some of the next coming slides. OSD Help Desk is a fantastic resource for technical support with uploading a quote. Next slide, please. Okay, next I'll go over the supplier diversity program in Massachusetts. Next slide, please. Supplier diversity program for supplier diversity program policy for POS procurements and contracts. The SDP program for purchase of service contracts is unique. It's not. It is not the same as the SDP program for goods and services. Actually, should I hold up and take some questions? I apologize. I just kept running there. Okay, thanks, Alicia. Thank you for that. So I will take questions right after this section. I apologize. Thank you, Lorraine. I'll get through this slide and then I'll take questions. Thank you for your patience. So on this slide, we've listed a link to a POS purchase of service specific SDP commitment fulfillment tutorial that was provided. It's on YouTube. It was provided by the Supplier Diversity Office. It is a fantastic resource. It goes through each step of the process, and it's unique to purchase of service contracts, which is fantastic. There aren't many resources available surrounding or tutorials available surrounding POS SDP. This is the one that we could find, and it's a fantastic resource, so please utilize it. There's also a link to an SDP policy for POS procurements document. There's a link to that on the slide as well. That gives some great background information on POS specific SDP policy, and that's another document that can answer many of the questions that have come in on the Q&A as far as responses to the questions. Great resource. Utilize those resources, please. So
Are you ready to take questions, David? It
yes,
looks like Lorraine has a question.
Sure.
Lorraine, if you could just unmute yourself.
Yep.
So my question does have to do with the SDP, David. Thank you.
Okay.
Family child care providers eligible, do you know, to register as MBEs or DBAs or?
Absolutely. So you're welcome to register. However, registering and being certified as a SDO provider does not exempt you from partnering with SDP certified vendors and including an SDP form as part of your response. So you're welcome to certify yourself. However, you're still required to partner with SDP vendors and upload an SDP form as part of your response.
And is there, so the second piece of my question was, is there scoring points depending on the percentage of your footprint?
And that's a great question, because that is one from the chat that I think, David, a lot of people are interested about the 25% allocation for SDP.
Sure. So the 25% overall evaluation or overall weighting of the 25% weighting of overall criteria of the response. That's an OSD requirement for all contracts, purchase of service, and goods and service contracts in Massachusetts. The provider's percentage commitment does have a one-to-one relationship with the score related to that section, if that makes sense. Did that answer your question, Lorraine?
No, not really. So I'm gonna
Okay,
have
I
to,
apologize.
yeah, so I
David,
think,
so you want to go through your next few slides? That may help
Sure.
with some
Okay.
more visuals. Yeah.
Thank you, Alicia. Okay, next slide, please. So for SDP requirements, what is the required commitment? The STO recommends at least 1% of a bidder's Commonwealth contract revenue should be spent with SDP partners. The bidder's percentage of spending with SDP partners for the prior fiscal year can be seen as percent of spend on the completed SDP form, and I'll point to that on the next slide. And then what types of partnerships count towards SDP? We've included a link here to the SDO directory of certified businesses. Just to go over how to kind of navigate that directory. When you click on that link, it takes you to the SDO directory. You'll want to click under business type, you'll want to click all. Under certification type, please leave that blank. And then for certification agency, you'll want to select the SDO. And then you can either search, and if you click search at that point, it's going to pull down all certification types that are certified by the SDO at that point. There's also a field to search by company name, or you can search by commodity. So essentially, you could search by organization type, electrician, HVAC, those kinds of things. But that's also a step-by-step tutorial for that, including those instructions is, or listing those instructions is included in that purchase of service SDO video that we included on a link to on the previous slide. I could take Nancy's question now. Oh, sorry, Nancy, I apologize for that. I didn't see you walk away. Sorry for that.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you. So my question actually goes back to the first slide that Amanda referenced about the seat allocation charts. And I don't see where is that even found? The seat allocation charts that you said were switched around.
So in the read-only zip file,
Okay.
Appendix 5.
Okay. Thank you.
John, could I take your question? John Rock.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So it says that the STP information in STP form counts for 25% of the evaluation of the proposal. I don't understand why it's given so much weight. And the other part of my question is, we've tried very hard to find diverse vendors. We have vendors who are minority owned or women owned, but they don't want, for some reason or other, they don't want to go through the process. Some of them are small, of registering with the state. So I guess we can't count them. So that's my two-part question.
Sure.
Can we count those people or not?
They have to be registered with the SDO to be counted towards counted as an SDP partner. I can tell you that the registration process through the SDO to certify as an SDP, it's not a lengthy process. It's very efficient process. And I know there's a question that came in the Q&A on, there was some concern over the time, between now and the bid response, whether bidders would have enough time if they were in this exact same situation, John, where they had vendors that they hadn't, they believed they would be able to certify as SDP partners. But would there be enough time for them to do so? And the answer to that is yes. So,
Okay, so, but it's tough. You can't, so I know they qualify, okay?
right,
Because they're the owner, right? But
right.
you can't force them to register, and it's kind of frustrating. And the other part of the question is, 25% of what?
It's weighted at 25% of the overall evaluation, and that 25% weighting is really, it's an SDO requirement for any contract that is procured in Massachusetts by an executive agency. So that's really a requirement, and it's required on both sides, on purchase of service and on goods and service contracts, 80121. It's not a it's an SDO requirement for all contracting.
So I'll reiterate what David is saying. For all contracts with the state that are procured, there is a 25% weight for the SDP plan. So it is not specific to this RFR. It is a requirement with doing business with the state.
Right.
I think if David, maybe we can move on to the next slide. And if people still have questions, if you can submit them in the chat, and we'll take those and answer them either at the end or through the written comments. Just want to make sure that we're moving along to be able to get through all of the slides today.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you for that. So on this slide, we've included an example of a completed SDP form. Just important to note right at the top, if you've completed a purchase of service SDP form via your UFR filing in the current fiscal year in FY24, you're not required to complete a new form. You may if you wish, but you're not required to complete a new SDP form. You can just include a copy of that completed FY24 SDP POS form as part of your response to this solicitation. You're welcome to complete a new one, but it's not a requirement. So on this form, in part 1, please list your organizational and contact information. As part of your response to the solicitation, please list your organizational and contact info. So the totals that are to be included in part 2, provider revenue information from the UFR reporting year. Those totals can be found on the POS expenditure and federal funds listing posted by OSD on the provider's UFR filing site. So those totals, it's the provider's revenue from Commonwealth POS contracts and the total gross revenue in the UFR reporting year can be found on the provider's UFR filing site. Part 3 is where the bidder would provide their list their SDP partners, certification type and business arrangement. In the committed amount in the current fiscal year field, provider should list the commitment amount for this current fiscal year. So for FY24, this is the amount that you're committing to spending in the current fiscal year with the partners listed in the form. In the expended amount in the UFR reporting year prior fiscal year field, providers should enter the total expended amount in the previous fiscal year. So this form would list the expended amount in the UFR reporting year. That's that would be for FY24. You'd be listing your partners. On the left, the certification type, the contracting relationship type, and then the dollar values that have been expended in that SDP relationship by each vendor. So that's for FY24. The commitment amount current fiscal year, so this contract will launch 25, in that column, you would be entering the totals that you would be committing to in the FY25 column. James, can I take your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I understand the OSD requirement. I was mostly just making a comment on with the SDP that's filed. The FY24 obviously is, passed. So it is what it is that we've already filed. As far as the scoring goes, when they're looking at, I don't know if the scoring is going to be based on FY24 or if it's going to be really looking at FY25 or a combination of the two. But I know in our particular example, we have numerous vendors that are eligible and they're attempting to go through the process. But I believe their first step is they have to do a class or a Zoom meeting or some sort, and they don't even have those scheduled out until July. So it's very difficult for us to say, again, because we could incentivize them to get on there, to get on the list, is to try to say, well, we want to be able to put them for our FY25, and we probably will be able to have them on our FY25 when we file it next year, but we can't put them on the list because they're not currently on the list in time for the RFR. So it's just a little bit of a roadblock that I think some have concerns as to, how that's going to look, especially as it relates to then being, 25% of your score. So I don't know if that offers a little bit of clarity.
Sure. Yeah, I can understand concern with that. There, I would advise, providers do have the ability to upload a revised SDP form throughout the process. So if you're submitting an SDP form that's listing partners to this response and you're getting it in before the response deadline, you can upload, so you could upload a revised SDP, I believe. I'll confirm. If you could enter your question into the chat, I'll get confirmation on the answer, and we'll upload that Q&A as part of the formal Q&A that'll be posted on April 19th.
Yeah, I think that was answered, that you can revise it because you can revise your filing, as far as the UFR or A133 also. I think it's just a question. Like I say, I'm only giving my example, but we have numerous vendors that, are willing and able and could significantly affect the way our SDP form looks. But we've already tried to get them to go through the process. And like I say, step one is a class, and the nearest class, at least 2 weeks ago, wasn't even until July. So, we can't get them on there in time for the RFR, so I think some of us recognizing the importance of this now are saying, okay, well, we can be proactive to do that, but there isn't time to be proactive for it. So maybe it's causing some of the, concern.
Okay, absolutely. Understood. I will get confirmation on the timelines as far in any flexibility that the SDO could offer as far as timelines and how that associates with these two solicitations, and we will include that clarification as part of the Q&A document that's uploaded on 419.
And I know that there are a couple of people that have their hands raised. If you can drop your question in the chat, and then we'll either try to get to it at the end, or it will be a part of our written Q&A response that's uploaded on April 19th.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Amanda. So now we're going to jump into the significant details related to your budget form and your budget narratives and the instructions on how to submit. We know this was probably the #1 topic in the questions that have been submitted thus far. So hopefully we're able to answer a lot of your questions related to your budget submission. So first, let's jump into what is required. It's critical that you do review both the income eligible and the priority populations RFR, so you have clarity on the scope of work and the staffing expectation. So that's critical to read that thoroughly. Once you're able to determine your proposed number of seats by provider type, whether that be center-based or FCC system, then the program type that you are bidding for, income eligible and priority population, your region and your age group, then that can correlate with what your budget submission will look like. It will help you calculate what that annual fiscal operating cost would be. And this is necessary to complete the budget submission form. So knowing what your seat award proposal will be critical in what you're submitting for a budget. So that is the preparation piece. Also, it's essential to know that the budget form and the budget narrative for your administrative and support services contract reflect the minimum requirements for staffing and other program types. But make note, the budgets are not required for the unit rate contract. And so that unit rate contract is your seat award. And we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next slide. Also, what's required is when you are creating your budgets, it's allocating the appropriate FTEs and amount using only the position numbers and titles as they appear in the UFR titles and definitions. Administrative and the support budgets do not need to include all of your staff. And contract providers who are current contractors with the Commonwealth can refer to their most recent UFR to receive guidance on how they've allocated FTEs in the past and what UFR definitions they've used in the past. And finally, the submission of a budget should reflect the full fiscal year of costs, so 12 months. We received that question a number of times, how many months should I submit? But you should submit the full fiscal year of costs for administering the EEC contract based on the number of seats proposed. So those are some of the requirements to think about as you are preparing your budget submission. So let's talk about the types of contracts by RFR and population, which you receive. So that unit rate contract represents the child care seat award. Similar to those who are current contractors with the EEC, that is the contract that you have now. No budget submission is required for the unit rate contract. So that just represents your seat award. What the cost reimbursement contract represents is the administrative and support services contract. So for each cost reimbursement contract, a budget form and a budget narrative must be completed and submitted with the bidder response. The cost reimbursement contract is specific to the program type the bidder is proposing to serve. So those are the two definitions that you want to be mindful of in your submission. So this chart should be helpful to get a visual of what the different types of contract you'll receive as a bidder. So if you're a center-based program and you're applying for the income eligible contract, you will receive a unit rate contract for your seat and then a cost reimbursement contract for the 5% administrative costs. Again, if you're an FCC system, you'll receive, we're applying for income eligible, you'll receive a unit rate contract for your child care seats and a cost reimbursement contract for the administrative FCC fee. What requires a budget? Again, the unit rate contract does not require a budget. However, the cost reimbursement portion of the contract does require a budget. So if you look down further into the priority populations RFR, it's a little bit variations with that particular submission. So for center-based programs that are submitting for this RFR for priority populations, if you are bidding for childcare seats for the homeless and parents under 24, the unit rate contract, again, will reflect your seats. The administrative contract and the support services contract, the homeless and the parents under 24 can be combined for those seats. However, you would need to submit a separate administrative contract, cost reimbursement contract for your center-based at 5%. And we're going to show you examples of all this, but I want to give you a chart to kind of lay it out a little bit, in a separate cost reimbursement contract for your support services. DCF will have to be separate. So you would receive a DCF unit rate contract for your contract seats. You have to complete a budget for your administrative cost reimbursement contract and a separate budget for your support services contract for DCF. And similarly, for FCC systems, again, the homeless and parents under 24, the unit rate contract you'll receive for your childcare seats, and then separately creating a budget and budget narrative for your cost reimbursement for the administrative portion and a cost reimbursement for your support services portion. And separately for DCF, what requires the budget? Again, the unit rate contract does not require the budget. However, the cost reimbursement contracts related to the administrative services and the support services contract does require a budget. So hopefully this gives you a little bit of visual of what budget forms and budget narratives are required. Going on a little bit further, so this breaks down what I just discussed, required budgets based on the program types and what should be submitted with those, with the specific bidder response. So income eligible, again, required budget submissions are required for the administrative portion. You just need one budget form and one budget narrative for your center-based program, and then a separate budget form and a separate budget narrative if you're an FCC system. So if you are an organization that has both, then you would need to submit separate budget forms and budget narratives for each portion of your organization, whether it be the center-based in an FCC system. For priority populations, again, what we've done here is allow for the homeless and parents under 24 can combine those budgets and submit one budget form and one budget narrative if you're a center-based program for the administrative portion, and then a separate budget form and a separate budget narrative for the support services portion of that response for homeless and parents on the team. Again, DCF has to be separate. So that would be a separate budget form and a budget narrative for the administrative portion of a center base and then the support services. And lastly, for FCC systems, very similar required budget submissions. And so they must be completed for the different provider types, center-based, FCC systems, and then the different program types, income eligible, homeless and parents under 24. And bidders only need to submit one budget form and one budget narratives for the homeless and parents under 24. Okay. So I'm going to stop right there. We can take a couple of questions based on those two charts before we jump into the actual budget forms and how to calculate. So we can talk about those two charts with just a couple of questions. So I see Lorraine has a question.
And is my assumption correct that these are per region?
These are not per region. You can combine a region. So that would be another, I'll talk about a little bit of that in the next session. Yep.
Thank you.
Any other questions that we want to take? Laura?
Thank you, Alicia. I just want to make sure I understand the connection between the budgets
Correct.
and then the monthly expenditure reports. So for agencies that have both FCC and centers and are submitting for priority and income eligible across all the populations, we will have a total of 10 budgets to submit according to your chart, 10 separate budgets. Will we be submitting 10 separate monthly expenditure reports each month to connect to each budget?
Yep, so we do have a section on monthly expenditure reports. So thank you for bringing that up. That I will actually show you an example of that. And then we'll talk a little bit about what that process is going to look like. So that's much later in the presentation, but thank you for bringing that up, Laura. But yes, that's a great question. All right. Let's see. Let's jump into the instructions on how to complete your budget purchase of service form. All right. So this is the pre-step, and it's necessary in order to determine how much your organization can budget for in your administrative and or support services contracts. So we have 3 different cost reimbursement contract types that you can potentially submit for. So for center-based programs that do submit for a bid for this RFR, your center-based administrative contract will be calculated based off the proposed total seat contract dollar amount. You multiply that dollar amount by the 5% admin rate, and that will equate to your annual total administrative rate contract amount. Okay. Again, the primary goal is get to your total program and annual fiscal operating costs that will be purchased by EEC, not including any other aspects of your funding. This is just this portion of the contract. With the FCC system administrative contract, again, you would take the proposed total seat award, you multiply that by the service days in a contract year. You multiply that by the region weighted average for the over 2 and the under 2, and that will equate to your annual total administrative rate contract. And so that's for FCC system. If you're an organization that does have both, then you would calculate these separately. Lastly, if you are bidding for the support services priority populations contract, your support services cost reimbursement contract will calculation will look like this. Taking that proposed total seat award, multiplying it by the service days in a contract year, you would multiply that by the support services rate, which right now is posted at $24 per day, and then you would equate to your annual total support services contract amount. Separate budgets for each region or each age group is not required. So just to make that clear with everyone, you do not need a separate budget for if you have a center-based program in Metro Boston, a center-based program in Metro, you do not have to have a separate budget for those. Also, if you have multiple age groups, that is not required. You can submit an aggregate total budget for all regions in age type. However, it does have to be separated by the center-based admin, the FCC admin, if you happen to have both, and if you're doing your support services, those do have separate calculations. So hopefully that's helpful to you as you're determining how many budgets that you need, that you don't have to do one for each region, but you do have to do the work to determine how much that cost would be if you're going to aggregate and total all the budgets for all the regions in the age type. And just to circle back just a little bit on what Laura was talking about when you're getting reimbursed, reimbursement will be based on your seat award each month. And I'll talk a little bit about that in the monthly expenditure section, but your reimbursement will be based on your seat award, not based on your utilization. All right, so I think I have a stop here, but I think we can stop here. I can ask questions. I will show you an example so you can actually see what this looked like, but I'll take a couple questions related to this particular slide here, if we have any.
Alicia, one came in, what number of service days that they should be using for the family child care system administrative contract and the support services contract?
Correct, that's a great question. So what EEC has done is given providers the maximum service days that we would potentially have in a contract year. So the number of days would be 262. And I'll show you that example in a couple of slides. So we're using the 262 as the maximum days that we could potentially have in a contract year. Any other questions, Amanda? If we want to take one live from, we can take John, if you have a, John.
Okay, yeah, hi. Sorry to hog the space. So just quickly, for income eligible, we are just submitting one budget, the administrative budget, correct?
It depends on the program type. Are you center-based or FCC system? You're center-based. So yep, what you're doing is taking your proposed seats for all, because you're a multi-location of care center-based program, taking your proposed seats, getting the contract award, getting the award amount based on all those seats. So taking your infant toddler, your preschool, your school age, getting that aggregate total, multiply that by the administrative rate, and then getting your administrative contract amount.
Okay, so how's that relate to the table 3 staff list? is that list a list of all our staff? Or just the administrative staff? Is it a
So
list of,
that's, yeah, that's separate from, so that staff is just EC requesting a list of staffing for list RFR. It does not have, I think I said in a couple of slides, all of your staff does not have to be included in the budget. However, we do want a list of your staff in a separate table. Does
so
that
it's a
make
list,
sense?
it's a list, and a list of our entire childcare staff, correct?
Correct. And I can't speak to that table. I don't know if we want to address the table here, Amanda, or if that's a separate question we want to take back as far as that table is concerned. But to reflect back to the budget piece, your budget does not have to reflect all of your staff, because it doesn't, the budget's not going to reflect all of your funding because you have a unit rate contract that's an addition to this funding that does not require a budget.
John, if you could write your question related to
Okay.
table 3 into the chat, then we will respond to it. as part of
Okay,
that.
thank you. Yeah, thank you. And the same question goes for the priority population staff list. Is that just a staff list of
Again, if you
our
can
support? Okay,
write in that question, then we'll
right.
include it.
thank you.
All right, let's jump into completing the actual budget. For those who've attended the prior bidders conference sessions, they've seen this slide on your instructions on how to complete your budget form. Again, you must complete your pre-step, which is the calculating of your total program annual fiscal year cost that will be purchased by EEC. And so when you do receive your budget form, the purchase of service form, you would enter your organization name. In this case, program type is that you're a center-based program responding to requesting income eligible, FCC system for support services. And then you would list all of the resources specified in the contract that are needed to operate the program based on this budget. So there are columns that require a UFR title number and a UFR position title in the order that they appear in the UFR definitions, using that same exact number and position title. For FTEs, you want to indicate the FTEs, a full-time equivalent in the FTE column. If there's staff that have the same title on one line, you can combine those FTEs into one line. And with that document, we know it's in Word. However, you can add additional lines to that document. And for organizations that have, and we understand organizations have variations of full-time equivalents, whether it's from 30 to 35 hours, 37.5 or 40. So it is based on what your employer defines as full-time equivalent. And lastly, you want to, for each line listed in the budget, enter the total cost in the amount column, and then calculate each subcategory within that form.
Lila,
So
how do you do it?
give a sense of what that looks like. So here's a sample of what they call a purchase of service attachment 3. So this is the budget form. Again, what you would do is enter the program name at the top and then the program type. When you are completing this budget, you want to only enter in the current column. So the current FTEs, the current amount, enter the UFR title numbers on the left-hand side here. And then the program components include your direct care program support staff. You would list them there. You would subtotal this information, subtotal the FTE, subtotal the amounts of your staff, allocate your payroll taxes and your fringe in these two boxes here. The next section includes occupancy and facilities, and so on. And then there's other direct program support. They, OSD recommends that you use font size 8 when completing the budget. That way everything fits nicely. And don't complete any other columns, as these columns would be designated for any amendments that would be needed for future contracting. So again, it's critical that you use only the UFR title numbers and titles that we've provided for you in instruction 6, which is the UFR titles and definitions document. So in my next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the common UFR titles that I have pulled from current contract providers and FCC systems that are currently contracted by EEC. And so this is what they look like. There is a UFR title number. There's some examples of specific cost line items that are allocated to the UFR. And again, this is what I've pulled from UFR just so you can have a connection to what your organization would have used in the past. However, because this is a new contract and you're submitting a new budget, you want to evaluate what the needs are based on the cost reimbursement funding that we are that you're allocating towards this particular contract. So, so we have childcare directors, lead teachers, we have social workers that are able to be allocated. Different facility line items can be allocated. There's staff travel and mileage, program supplies. There isn't a cost line UFR title number for positions like CFO or CEOs. However, OSD does allow for it. They're just not, in most cases, not fully funded by these contracts, but there's a portion of their direct service that is tied to the contract. So those can be allocated as well. And for any priority populations, in this example, I pulled a DCF one, and there was a social worker allocated, as well as direct care consultants and program supplies and materials. So this is just kind of a breakdown. However, this slide shows you some definitions that I pulled directly from the UFR manual. So in category 1, we have the direct care program staff components that are determined by the program function. So focus on the function in the definitions and not particularly the title. So what you want to do is really read some of the definitions and see where your staff may fall within the UFR titles, because your titles most likely do not correlate with what the UFR manual has designed for. So review the definitions and see how they correlate with the functions. So for example, understanding the UFR has an outdated term with daycare and still refers to us as OCC, we're able to submit a revised version to OSC this year so they can update their manual. So it will now say childcare director as approved by EEC as a childcare director and function in that capacity. So again, lead teacher, individual approved by EEC to be a childcare lead teacher in our programs. You know, for some of the direct care program staff, I noticed that some of these staff are either home visitors, or some of them are the intake staff that you would have doing the eligibility and authorization process within it. So it's critical to read the definitions. There are some credentialing that comes with it as well. So there's different degree levels that may come with staffing. So the definitions that help guide you in determining what UFR number and what UFR title that you will correlate with your staffing models and the staffing expectations as detailed in the RFR. So I'll take one question related to this particular slide, 1 or 2 questions related to the direct care and program staff. Amanda Pelcher?
Hi, thank you. My question is, because for a center-based income eligible RFR, this budget would be over administrative costs. Am I correct in saying it wouldn't be quite appropriate to list someone like a direct care teacher who is a very matter-of-factly a direct cost of the program and not an administrative cost?
So I think it's just more about a term rather than the function. We're allowing the form does say direct care, so we're allowing for direct care to be budgeted, even though we've titled it as an administrative fee.
Okay.
Does that make more sense? Yes. So we're allowing for direct care staff to be allocated to the budgets.
Understood. And this is going to be quick too, and this was actually in the chat. Should we show all costs, even though that would exceed what our 5% is, or do you want us to limit the budget to what the 5% would be?
You would limit the budget to what the 5% would be. So you're only
Okay.
submitting a budget of the cost that EEC is purchasing. So again, it's the childcare seats that you are bidding for, and I'll go back to that slide. Your proposed childcare seat total, that will kind of give you an aggregate total amount. Then you multiply that by the 5%, and that will give you your annual cost. Believe this 5% is not going to cover all of the costs. So what EEC is just providing is some additional costs, because we understand there's some cost to overseeing the program. An FCC system, what we did was just pull out the FCC admin rate that was usually included in the cost reimbursement. We pulled it out, and now you just would determine what your annual cost, admin rate cost contract would be that you would budget for.
Very good. Thanks so much.
You're welcome. All right, so let's move on to the next category. So category 2 is the other direct care program resources. And so these are resources other than the direct care staff and program staff that is helpful to carry out and support the delivery of the other primary program services. So that may include some consultants that you may need to come on and do some program management, some operations, provide some technical assistance that's related to the program that you're administering. Some staff training is allowable costs to be included in your budget. Staff travel, understanding that, FCC systems have home visitors that do travel, so that can be budgeted within these contracts as well. Client transportation is a huge one. So as you know, for priority populations, so the children that are eligible, they will still receive that daily reimbursement rate of the 18 and 12. So when you do your billing, those rates will still be applied to that unit rate contract. However, if there's any additional transportation costs that are needed, you can budget for that as well. We assume it's not going to cover the entire thing, but however, you'll still get your unit rate per day, per child, 12 and 18 for the child, but separately, if you budget for client transportation, that is also allowable. Program supplies, materials, again, it's needed for program service delivery. And any program support, it's for direct administrative program support associated with that single program. It's not an allocation across programs. So that cost line item 216 is really program support related directly to the income eligible or the support services program if you're going to allocate those funds. I'll take a couple of questions here. Mary Kay?
Thanks, Alicia. So I just want to be sure I understood what you said about transportation. You said the 18 or 22 or I think it is dollars a day for transportation. You said that went into the unit rate contract, but so but does that mean it still is on top of the per child rate in that unit rate contract, correct?
Correct. So yeah, it would be as it would be. So priority populations now is similar to income eligible, if you look at it. So the child eligible for transportation, when you do your billing, you have your daily reimbursement rate minus any required parent fees. You'll get paid on the child care, but also if they are eligible for transportation, you'll get paid for the 12 or 18, if it's one way or two way. On the unit rate side, however, if you do want to budget for additional transportation costs, you can allocate it to your budget that's in the cost reimbursement contract.
Okay, but the system portion, the administrative portion that's paid to the system as opposed to what gets passed through to the FCC providers, whatever we put in that budget has to be limited to whatever, 1674 a day, whatever that dollar amount is, correct? Same as with the 5%, even if it's going to cost more, you can't put it in.
Yep, so the 5% is for center-based programs, and the FCC system will have their weighted rate per day. Yeah, the C allocation. Yeah.
But even if your costs are higher, you just don't put in any budget higher.
Right, you only put in what EEC is purchasing.
Yeah, got it. All right, thank you, Alicia.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. All right, let's jump into the category 3 and category 4, which is your occupancy. So these are, program facilities, so your owned or leased program facilities and grounds, so your rent or your mortgage. Facilities operations include any, any contracts that you may have that helps maintain your facilities. And lastly, I know the number one question, can your indirect costs be allocated here? Yes, you can add your indirect costs in category 410, agency and program administration. So this component is for the resources related to the administration and the support activities that are both directly related to the program and those that are related to the overall direction of the agency. So these costs associated with the overall direction of the agency may cross all agency programs and not directly associated with any one program or a combination of programs, but provide an indirect benefit to those programs. So it is the indirect administration. So I know that was a question that came up a lot of times in the question and answer submission. So hopefully that answers that for everyone. All right, for the sake of time, we're going to jump into how to complete your budget narrative. And so as you are working through your budgets, simultaneously you want to think about what your narrative would include. Information should correlate between the two forms, but also you want to think about the cost justification of these budgets. So within the narrative, you would, again, as you entered it into your budget form, you also want to enter your UFR title and position number in the budget narrative. Make sure they correlate the FTEs and the total cost. This budget narrative also requests a percentage of the total budget, by taking the total cost amount for each budgeted line item and divided it into the total budget. And I'll show you an example of that. Then lastly, in the section, definitely provide a justification as to why that line item was budgeted and requested for EEC to purchase. So this next slide provides an example. And so again, brief justification. So again, what we have here on the left is a position title. You have your FTEs that you would allocate your total costs. You would need to get a percent of the budget for each line item. And for these documents, again, you can insert more lines if they're needed. And then provide a cost justification within the cost justification section. EEC expects answers to be provided, indicate and align with the scope of services, the staffing model, and administration of the program. And then we'll evaluate it accordingly based on best value and the bidder's capacity to meet the scope of services. So that is your budget narrative. And I know we've shared this in all 4 of the different RFRs.
And Alicia, I think there may be some confusion. So can you go back over one more time about transportation?
Sure.
And it's included in the support services. Is it include where does that get reflected?
So one of the things we talked about in the priority populations RFR bidders conference, the 2 sessions that we have, what we did was the support services does not have to, the $24 per day. What we did was take our priority populations children, and now we are allowing them to be billed for transportation on the per child per day rate, similarly to income eligible. So those children you would go, when you enter into CCFA and you determine that in transportation is needed, as you're billing for your childcare costs, you're also, for those who do the attendance code, we might as well go down that road, you would select 1-way or 2-way transportation for those children. And so now you would see that you're getting paid for the daily reimbursement for the transportation, the 12 and the 18. What I'm saying here now, if you need additional transportation costs, you can allocate it to the budget line items. Or if you feel like your transportation services can be covered through the $12 and $18 per day, then you don't have to budget for transportation in your support services contract or your center-based admin fee or your FCC admin fee. We're just saying it's an allowable cost line item. However, transportation costs can be covered through the unit rate contract because the children will be billed on a per day, per child basis. Hopefully that makes sense. Is that clear to everyone? Okay.
But the question in the chat says, do we include the transportation, the cost of our transportation in determining what our 5% admin is?
No, you do not. It's
Okay,
in the unit rate contracts. Remember, the unit
Okay.
rate contract is not a cost, it's not a budget-based contract. It's similar to your proposed fee.
okay.
All right, let's jump into some examples here so we have time. All right, so we do have one example that we're going to provide for you. So this is ABC Test Childcare. So ABC Test Childcare is a childcare family system, family childcare system with 25 family childcare educators and 2 center-based locations of care. The locations of care are in 2 different reasons, so they are proposing to submit a bid for the following. So in their FCC system portion, they're proposing 75 seats in the combination of their Metro and Metro Boston region. You know, we'll just say that should be over 2, under 2, not preschool, and it's income eligible. And then for their center-based program, this would be 80 seats, the 2 region. For their preschool program, they're bidding for income eligible. And then for family childcare, there's 25 seats for DCF for over 2 and under 2, and 25 seats for the DCF submission for preschool, for their preschool program. And then for their family childcare program, they are bidding for both families experiencing homelessness and parents under 24 for just their family childcare system. So multiple contracts here, which we've seen across our state as well, where, you know, we have organizations that do have both family childcare systems and center-based programs. And so they're bidding for different program types. So how do we do the calculation? So for the income eligible portion of the ABC Test Childcare, what we want to first determine is how we get to our income eligible cost reimbursement. So remember, income eligible would only be the cost reimbursement administrative contracts. So first you want to determine what is my proposed seat award for those contracts. And so for this organization, their center-based program is bidding for 80 in preschool seats. And so what you want to do is take the, because Metro and Metro Boston has the same reimbursement rate, it makes it a little bit easier to determine your cost. However, if you were doing Northeast and Metro Boston, it would probably be 2 different costs that you have to determine. So they want to take their 80 seats, multiply by the daily reimbursement rate for Metro and Metro Boston, multiply it by the 262 service days in a contract year, and this gives them their proposed total seat contract amount. So for this example, it's 1.6 million. Then they want to take that amount and multiply it by the 5% admin rate, and it equates to a cost reimbursement contract for $83,000. So that's how this center-based portion of this organization would determine their center-based administrative budget. Secondly, they want to do a separate calculation for their family childcare system portion of their organization. And so what they would do, they have 75 FCC income eligible seats. They're going to multiply that by the weighted rate for Metro and Metro Boston, which is 17.27. Multiply that by the 262 days in a year. And that comes to 339,000. And then, so that becomes their annual fiscal year operating contract amount. So for ABC Test Childcare, they would need to submit 2 budget forms and 2 budget narratives just for their income eligible bidder submission, because we're allowing for the combination of the regions. And then if if they happen to have some infant seats or school age seats, and then they did the math, they would still only have to submit 2 budget forms and 2 budget narratives. I'll take one question related to this slide. No questions? All right, we'll move on to the next one. All right, so this is where, all right, I'll take Carly.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Carly, want to go first, and I'll take Heidi after that.
Hi, thank you. So I did just submit it in the chat again, but our question really has to do with seat count in our bid. I think all of us, our seat count currently are much higher than what our contract originally was for, just because of the flex and the changes that were made over COVID. So our question is, when determining the seat count that we're going to apply for, is there going to be communication from EEC on whether that seat count is too high? Or are they going to be rejected just based solely off that number? Are we going to be able to have a conversation or counter to adjust the seat count based off of what EEC is determining or looking at what's appropriate for the program?
I mean, do we want to address that process here?
I think we should, can you submit that question into the written Q&A? And then Alicia, recognizing the time and that there's 10 minutes left, let's sort of go through the rest of the slides, and hopefully we'll have time for questions at the end. And if not, please write down your questions in the chat so we can capture them and include them in our Q&A upload on April 19th.
Sounds good. All right. So here is example budget for ABC Test Childcare. This is just their center-based administrative fee budget. And so in this budget, they did allocate a daycare teacher at 0.5. And then they allocated a 1 FTE for their maintenance, house and groundskeeping and cook allocation. So they did the subtotal for the staff. They allocated the necessary payroll taxes and fringe benefits. Then they did the subtotal for the direct care and program support section, which includes the total staff, payroll taxes and fringe. Then they allocated some funding for a consultant, some program materials. You would subtotal the this section of the other direct care program, and then lastly, totaling the entire budget form. So we got to the 83,976 by allocating just a few of their expenses to this particular budget. Again, you don't allocate all of your program expenses here, only the amount that EEC is purchasing, and in this case, it's the 83,976. Here's the corresponding budget narrative that you would, indicate, again, carrying over the information from your budget form to the budget narrative. The FET has to correlate, the amount of cost has to correlate. You do have to get your percentage of the total budget here. So some work would need to be done here. You would indicate why you have this teacher here, EEC certified teacher for the classroom, and it's at 15 hours per the week. And you can insert the name as you have in your org chart of who this particular position is. For this particular budget, they indicate that line item is their cook. And so they indicate what that cook is doing, and you can indicate the name of that person here. For payroll taxes and fringe, indicate the percentage of the salary expense and what it may include. And it's for the staff indicated in section 1 of this narrative. Dropping down to the other program support. So again, they allocated for direct care consultant. And it's to support, program design, program management. And so you would indicate, if known, the number of hours they would be working for from the time period and the hourly rate. And any program supplies. And lastly, you want to make sure your total budget adds up. So the different subtotal section adds up, but also this total budget aligns with your budget form. So that's the income, one of the income eligible budgets. Here's the FCC section of their income eligible budget. So separately, They were allocating for a direct care program staff supervisor and some other direct care program staff, level 2 and level 1. You have your FTE and your amounts, totaling your FTE subtotals, the subtotaling of this section here, your fringe, you would enter it here. They have some occupancy costs that they're allocating towards this particular budget. So facilities, any operating costs, and total of that section. Again, they're adding staff training, staff mileage. So all of this stuff, all of these line items are allowable. Some program supplies and material is allowable. Again, program support for 216 is allocated here. You will subtotal all of the program costs. Again, this is only the cost that EEC is purchasing for the FCC admin portion of this cost reimbursement contract. Here is the narrative that correlates with that particular budget. Again, making sure that you carry over the position titles, FTEs, and the costs. Calculate what that percentage of the total budget this cost represents, give some allocation. If it's not a full FTE, and then so you would indicate this is only a portion of this individual's time. That's 10 hours allocated to the income eligible FCC system. You can indicate the name. Again, if you have 2 staff that you're allocating to this particular budget, so this particular staff is doing intake and eligibility, and it's only a portion of their time for the FCC portion. Again, and then this is for this particular line item, they have the function of a direct care staff person. There's 2 FTE. However, there is a home visitor and a family support staff allocated to this budget. Again, payroll taxes and fringe support. Then you have program facilities operations. If there's lease offices, you might want to indicate the addresses, and any facilities operation support. If there is utilities, you want to indicate what location those operations are being allocated to. Staff training, staff mileage, program materials, again, allocating, subtotaling, getting the percentage of budget. Here's the program support. So support services, June. Program support. And again, subtotaling, making sure the budget narrative matches your budget form. So we have our last couple of sections here. So this particular program is also bidding for priority population. So again, this will be a separate budget calculation pre-step that they will have to take to determine what that cost is. So with the priority populations, if you are bidding for priority population, you're a center-based program, you would do a separate administrative budget for that priority populations submission. So again, taking the number of seats, proposed seats that you're bidding for, the reimbursement rate for that region where that location of care is located, the number of service days, and the year. So you get your total proposed seat contract amount multiplied by the 5%. And then here is that contract award amount. Separately, you would do a calculation for the support services contract. And so you take those same 25 seats, you multiply it by the 25 days in a contract year, multiply it by the $24 support services per seat rate, and then you would get the annual fiscal year support services contract with this amount. And so for ABC Test Childcare, they will need to submit 2 budgets forms and 2 budget narratives that represent their DCF contract with their priority populations bidder submission. This is just for their center-based portion of their organization. Separately, they would have to do one for their FCC system. And so for this one, you would do your administrative budget first. And for your administrative budget, you can get all of your seat awards for all the priority populations. So they are requesting 25 DCF, 5 homeless, 2 parents under 24, that's 32. Then they would do the math, your service days, your weighted rate, and get your contract award amount for the administrative portion of their priority populations contract. But then separately, they would need to do a budget for their DCF support services here. And then for their homeless and parents under 24, you would add both the homeless and the parent under 24 proposed seat awards together. So that's 7, and then do your math and get your contract award for that. And so for this FCC system, priority populations, you would need to get 3 budget forms and 3 budget narratives that represents their DCF and homeless parents under 24 contract for their priority population submission. And for the sake of time, the example would pretty much be the same. And so for this section, this particular budget, it's their priority populations DCF for their center-based program. So they're allocating the child care teacher, they're allocating a social worker, and they're also allocating a direct care program staff. You would do all of the totals as required, enter any allowable cost line items, any program support, and get your total program costs. Carry that over into your budget narrative. Again, having the lead teacher, the social worker, and any cost justification for the different position titles and positions that are being allocated. Get your percentage of program costs. Any occupancy, what is that allocated to? Direct care consultants, what is that allocated to? And then any program support as well. Again, making sure the total budget narrative matches the total budget forms. So I'm going to stop there because it's pretty much the same with the different narratives. We can take a couple of questions related to the budget the calculation examples as it correlates to the budget, and then we'll jump into the last section of the presentation. Any live questions that we want to take? None? Okay. Melissa D'Souza?
Hi, Alicia. So,
Hi.
shut that volume. Sorry for the echo right now. We're trying to work on that. I wanted to know if you could explain how to calculate the school age for the budget. So if you're bidding on a specific number of school age slots, are you going by full day? Are you going by before and after? Are we using X number of days for each? If you could just cover that so that we can calculate the budget amount, that would be helpful.
What I'll do is when we submit that in a, what I would prefer to do is actually submit a written example. So when we submit that with our Q&A written submission, that would be posted in the next few days.
Okay.
Is that helpful? Yeah, it's helpful to kind of write it out instead of trying to verbally explain that one. Any other verbal questions? Laura?
Yes, thank you, Alicia. I just want to return to the number of budgets question and the connection to the monthly expenditure report. And this was super helpful, so thank you. So now that we're clear on how many budgets we're submitting based on our agency type, et cetera, will we be submitting a separate monthly expenditure report for each budget that we've had to submit?
So why don't I just jump to the monthly expense? I know we have one more slide, but I'll jump to it now since we're here.
Thank you.
So yes. So for the monthly expenditure reports, let me just get to my notes because there are a couple of things I want to share with the monthly expenditure report. So number one thing to note with your monthly expenditure report is your submission is based on your seat award and not your utilization. This is a cost reimbursement process, and EEC will provide specific instructions on how to submit when we get to the contract award period. So we're not going to go over the process today, but we will have specific instructions on what that process would look like. But based on what we have for monthly expenditure reports and what's being utilized now, but yes, you would indicate your corporation name and the program type. For this one, it is their center-based administrative contract, because on the left side, you would put your what was confirmed as your budget cost reimbursement award amount. And then there will be balances in amount and invoice that you're submitting for, and then your remaining balance will be here. So based on this MER that we have created, it would be based on a number of budget forms that are submitted for the process. However, we will provide specific instructions during that contract period. But I just wanted to kind of give you a visual of what we would normally request. This is something that we have for our CCR&Rs now. And the second page is just, the separate section on the other direct care program costs, and what your balance is and what this invoice that you're submitting a cost reimbursement for, and then the balance of that program. So that's the MERs that we have currently, but more to come with that.
Could I ask a quick question about center base? If you are at the point that you're applying for slots that would be for growth more than what your current contract license says, would the license have to be intact on day one, or what's the process for that?
Yep. So Lorraine, we're going to actually address that in our question and answer submission response. Yes. David, I don't know if you want to jump in and talk about the naming conventions so that people understand of how they should submit their documentation, and then if folks want to stay, we can take a couple more questions. But if you want to jump in, David, on this section, that's fine.
Absolutely. Thank you, Alicia. So in this section, I'll go over document naming conventions. So these would be the naming conventions associated with the required forms that you would be uploading as part of your response. So we are asking for bidders to replace org name with the name of their organization. So for example, the bidder checklist would be named bidder checklist _ your organization name, and then saved and uploaded as part of your response. So just some of the examples of the forms and file types and who is required to submit is listed on the slide. And again, the slide deck will be available on the solicitations and combis in the near future. Next slide, please.
I think that was the only one.
Okay.
Yep.
Perfect. Tammy, you had a question?
I was curious, now that we're towards, actually not on the naming conventions, I'm sorry.
Sure.
It's more of an end question. Should I go ahead?
We can take it.
I guess, so the examples, I will say, have been very helpful, and kind of were not a part of the packaging before. So I feel like, I don't know if everybody else feels this way, but more examples would be very helpful. And then obviously, like, there's been, unfortunately, and you guys have to sift through all these, but it seems like there's been hundreds of questions asked on all 3 sessions. Do you foresee a session after all the questions are, answered, and you guys, produce that document where people could then actually ask even more detailed questions that they don't feel they understand after the questions have been answered?
I would ask Amanda for some guidance on that one, if I could.
So like after the 19th, after the documents produced, and because obviously everybody has different, circumstances, but after all the questions are answered in the document you guys are going to produce, would there be a session, do you feel, that we could all gather again to get even some more clarification before we have to submit?
I think
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I think we'll take this feedback and comment and have some more discussion and in the Q&A upload on the 19th, we'll let you know.
Okay. Thank you. I guess, yeah, it's more feedback of just, I think it would be helpful, and if you guys could take the time, I don't know how others feel.
Okay. Thank you, Tammy.
Sarah, did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just hoping you guys could give some guidance on how we handle school age for the seat calculation as far as calculating center-based admin, just so we can start on some initial budget work.
Sure. I think it's been asked a couple of times in the chat, so we're going to respond back to it in written form because I think it's a little bit easier to understand by seeing it in written form. Any other questions? And we'll leave the chat open a little bit longer for people to write their questions that they have, and also for us to capture all the questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
Will the slideshow be available in Combis?
Yes, the
This
slide
new-
deck and recording will be uploaded to Combis.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much